architecture that we've seen. There's a company called Guesswork, and they solve an interesting problem. So they solve the problem of being a recommendation engine for users who have never used a site before in a market where e-commerce is often new, or the site itself is new. So how do you make recommendations when you have no history of purchases, either in sort of your store at all, or for a particular user specifically? So it's an interesting, complicated problem, and they use a mix of machine learning and serverless. Super cool. So part of what they do is they do it on images. So they will look at products across countries and across continents to see, okay, maybe I don't know what this is called in this language, or instead of actually translating the metadata around it, they're like, well, let's just take a picture of it, right? A bowl is here, a bowl is a bowl in China, is a bowl in South Africa, is a bowl in Texas. And so by using the Vision API and some custom machine learning, they can analyze these images. And so they actually can aggregate data across huge amounts of existing e-commerce data sets to actually make intelligent recommendations when they really have no actual history or basis to do it on. And they do it all serverlessly. So the kind of classic example, Black Friday, they went from one user essentially to 20 million in one day. Thanks to the power of sort of that scaling up and scaling down of serverless, all of these components scaled up with them. So the flow is essentially the users on their mobile app, and they're talking to Firestore. And so this is interesting because they actually replaced, they were using App Engine for their web backend, and Data Store for their data storage. And they replaced both of those. They got rid of App Engine and Data Store and use just Firestore instead. And that's because your client talks directly to Firestore. And it turns out a lot of what the App Engine app was doing was literally just taking data from the client, putting it in the database, getting data from the database, giving it to the client. And in a Firebase Firestore model, when your client can talk directly to the database, and don't worry, it's protected by a bunch of security rules, and there's kind of a whole process around that, but it actually eliminated one of the layers entirely of the architecture. They were able to consolidate it entirely into Firestore. So anyway, the mobile app talks to Firestore, and those database records key off a couple of cloud functions, one of which goes to the Vision API, takes a look at, okay, what is this user looking at? Okay, I'm going to extract some labels, and then go and try and find some matching, and then also pump some of that data into BigQuery so they can do some reporting later. And then, of course, going back to the theme of backend as a service, is there some service that is out there that does what you want to do? Don't reinvent the wheel. So they use SendGrid to send the email directly to the users to make those recommendations. And one of the things that they liked about Cloud Functions, so not just that it's scaled, but because Cloud Functions are designed to be sort of single-purpose, little dedicated functions. There's a bunch of them strung together. So they could actually swap those functions out and do like refactoring their code, or they can experiment with new things, do some A/B testing, for example, using PubSub, and say, okay, well, we have a message coming into PubSub, and we have this function that's listening to it now. Well, let's actually spin up some other function that also listens to it and kind of do some A/B testing in parallel. And you never have to take the system down at all. It's all happening live. So super interesting and super cool architecture using all serverless tools.